Well, hey, you're watching What Was That About, a video podcast that we do here at All People's Church in Brampton, Canada. I'm the host, Pastor Moses. I'm joined with our lead pastor, Dr. Tony Soldano. Pastor, it's good to have you.
Hey, Pastor Moses.
Were you going to say something else?
Yes. Would you say that you're sick and tired of... I just want to know if you're sick and tired.
This is in reference to a conversation before the recording, and so
yes.
Anyways, it's good to have you join us. And
we love to have fun, don't we?
We do. And I've had pastors asking me why I'm so loud, and it's because I recently just drank a full can of kombucha. And I can feel my gut activated. Anyways, these are all preliminary comments that have nothing to do with the program.
Nothing at all.
Today, we want to talk, Pastor, about things that have been happening in the States.
My goodness.
And at a deeper level, you know, I like how you kind of take things beneath the surface of what people see. At a deeper level, we want to talk about the obsession with death.
Wow.
Yeah. So what's been happening in the U.S.? Why is it a big deal, Pastor?
So, Pastor Moses, it was leaked. First of all, there was a leak, which really should never happen. But, the Supreme Court now and the justices are very conservative. They're on the more on the conservative side. And so what was leaked was that they are going to reverse, or there is discussion of reversing a law that was passed some 50 years ago, Wade versus Roe, or Roe versus Wade, whichever way you want to say it. But basically that legalized abortion in America and has been the single most prevalent law in the murder. Let's call it what it is. It is the murder of 62 million, or at least 62 million, unborn children, unborn babies. These are human beings. And so it's been leaked out that, the Supreme Court, these justices, are going to reverse this law. And people, particularly on the left, on the liberal, on the Democratic side, are just losing their minds. And from the time we record this to the time it airs, you are going to see more and more battles, more and more protests from both sides. And this is huge. This is huge. They're going to be, it wouldn't shock me if we saw this erupt into violence, literally divide the country. But beyond, what people believe, at the end of the day, in our culture, in our society, even in our country, there is this obsession with death.
Right.
And, in Proverbs 8:36, very interesting, here's what, the Bible says. It says, "But he who sins against me wrongs his own soul, and all those who hate me love death." Now, on the surface, Pastor Moses, you might say, well, who loves death?
Right.
But look at it. Look at the laws from abortion to euthanasia, assisted suicide, the laws that have been passed that even people with, mental illness and struggles, that if they are having a bad day, literally, they could just make a decision to end their life. And so it is it's very concerning, even amongst governments, that death has become their friend. And yet in the Bible, and maybe you can talk about this, Isaiah tells us that death is an enemy.
Right.
We just celebrated resurrection.
Yeah.
And that the last enemy to be conquered will be death. And maybe you can talk about how death came into the world because of sin, and yet the world embraces death. They love it. Talk about that.
Yeah, no, it's, I think it's interesting that we have in Christianity a God who sends his son in the flesh to live a perfect life, but then to die an agonizing criminal's death on the cross. And John 3:16 tells us why. So that death would be overcome, so that those who would believe in him might not perish, might not die. So he does it to remove this idea and the concept of death, which started all the way back in the beginning, Genesis, where humanity decides to take good and evil and define good and evil based on their own terms. Like we're going to define what we can do and what we can't do. And as soon as humanity functions in that sort of mindset, well, Eve gives into the sin. Eve gives into the temptation of the serpent. So does Adam. And now you have with sin death entering the world, right? And it makes me think of even Cain and Abel, where you have the first murder.
Yes.
In the Bible take place. Why? For selfish reasons. So you know what I realized about humanity, Pastor, is we're okay that others suffer at our advantage. So if we are benefiting from it, if we are, quote unquote, as they would say, in America and in North America, because we cherish freedom, if it's for the benefit of our freedom, then who cares, who suffers from it?
Yes. And that's what abortion is, right? Like we're very crafty, or people are very crafty in their definition, because they don't call it murder, they don't call it the taking of a life. It's become a human right.
Right.
It's the right of women. And, somebody said, and it's not my quote, that, the most dangerous place for a child is within the womb of a woman, right? Because we've turned this idea that I can take life, I can murder life, I can murder another human being and call it a right. Now, if you murder people in everyday life, you're going to be incarcerated. Right. You're going to be tried. You're going to be, you're going to go to court, and ultimately you're going to serve a prison term. It doesn't seem to apply to children or these babies, these infants in the womb. And I say babies because they're human beings. Instead of then they dehumanize people by calling them, it's a fetus. No. Let's call it what it is, because here's what God also says. He says, before you were formed in your mother's womb, I knew you.
Right.
So God clearly expresses that life and identity even precedes the womb. And so this idea that, they're non-human, they're just a fetus or a blob of flesh is complete nonsense.
Right.
But you are absolutely right that, we have this idea that, we are free, we are autonomous, we are empowered. And then if it's not in the sense of abortion, then we can take our own lives. Well, considering you didn't give yourself life, who gives you the right to take life? The Bible is very clear. God is the author.
Yeah.
God is the taker of life. But I want to come back, Pastor Moses, to this idea of death, because, people look at death as an event. But when as you mentioned in Genesis, death came into the world. It's not just an event. It's an entity.
Yeah.
It is something that is even beyond the demonic realm.
Right.
Is stronger than the demonic realm, although the demonic realm loves to use it, and that, Jesus called Satan a murderer, and a murderer from the beginning.
Yeah.
But they operate through this thing. But if it's the last enemy to be swallowed up, it is even stronger than Satan. It is stronger than the demonic realm. It's an entity. God hates it.
Yeah,
God hates death. If Adam and Eve hadn't sinned, there'd be no death. But everything began to die. Listen, even as we are recording this, every second we are dying.
Yeah.
That is the truth, right? And yet there's this fascination with it.
Yeah.
There's this embracing of it.
Right.
And it's warped.
Yeah.
Pastor, it's warped.
So true. So true. And you have to ask the question, why is God's fascination with life? Right? Because when you have life, you have fruit. You have things that accompany.
God is life, right?
God is life. And then you have things that accompany life, things like joy and celebration.
Yes.
Right? And so from one perspective, why does God not tolerate, death, and why does God hate death? Because human beings are made in his image.
Right.
Right? And so human beings have value simply because they're made in the image of God.
Yes.
And so if you have a society outside of even that, if you have a society functioning in regards to the celebration of death, making death more and more available, well, you're going to reap the consequences of that. You're going to have a society that is full of grief, that lacks joy, because now this umbrella of death, which is this heavy, heavy cloud, is over the society, and no life-producing thing is going to come out of that.
Yeah. As you were speaking, you reminded me of John 10:10. The thief comes not except to steal and to kill and to destroy. I have come that they may have life and they may have it more abundantly.
Yeah.
I have come that they might have life and they might have it more abundantly.
Yeah.
So here we have the author of life.
Yep.
the giver of life,
Yeah.
the idea that Jesus rose from the dead,
Right.
right, in conquering death, in conquering the grave, in conquering hell.
Yeah.
No wonder he hates it.
Yeah.
He says, I'm the antithesis of this. I'm the opposite
Right.
of all this discussion on death. But here's the other thing, Pastor Moses. You can have your, maybe people are watching this and they don't agree with our, our view on whether it's, a life or pro, whether they're pro-choice versus pro-life, et cetera. But you know what is really, really troubling, and particularly in this area, is we do not have the ability to have intellectual, emotional, intelligent conversations anymore.
Yeah.
This subject is now politicized. It is weaponized. It is divisive. And it is literally going to erupt in violence and maybe even tear the most powerful country in the world apart if they're not careful. This is how strong it is, that death even works in the midst of dividing people, in the midst of it, as you talked about Cain and Abel, that who knows, people could literally die over this because that's how strong emotions are running. And it's so tragic. We can't even express thoughts and opinions anymore without it turning very, very ugly and nasty. And I think that plays right into the devil's hands.
So true.
Yeah.
So true. Yeah. Well, what I love about God is that, like you said, he is life, and life produces life, right? And so when we function in accordance to the ways of God, we're going to see life in our life, but also in society and in culture. And that's what we want to see happen.
And Pastor, God, John tells us that God is light and that God is life.
Life, yeah.
And everything about him is that, about development, about growth, about the future, about hope. And so, my friends, don't be fooled.
Yeah.
Don't be fooled by the rhetoric and all the poetic language that they wrap around these things. Death is an enemy.
Yep.
It's God's enemy. It's our enemy. And this is why Jesus died and rose, that we might have life. And somewhere, that even political parties and governments would grow a spine and understand that this is not a subject to, quote unquote, gain votes with.
Right.
We're talking about lives. We're talking about murder. We're talking about an obsession that is warped and twisted, and God hates it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well said. Well said. Well, listen, thank you again for watching today's episode. I hope that you gained some insight and some clarity, and that you were motivated to celebrate the life of God, that God is a giver of life. Once again, don't forget to subscribe, to comment, to like, and do all that good stuff. We will see you on the next episode.